Hi, everybody, and welcome to this month's Prosthetic Showcase webinar by Blatchford. Thank you for being on. I know it's always a busy time during the middle of the day, and I just appreciate you taking time out of your busy office to listen to us talk about some of our products that we're pretty excited about. Today, we're going to be talking about the Elan. Before we get started, we do have a few quick house rules. Dave, if you want to go to the next slide. Basically, everybody's going to be on mute, and that just kind of helps keep the background noise out. The webinar is being recorded. If you were on when I first started, you heard that happen. All of our previous webinars are on our YouTube channel at Blatchford Institute, at the Blatchford Institute YouTube channel. You can watch any of our past webinars there if you want to get a little bit of information. However, those recordings are not available for CEU credit, so just be aware of that. It's for informational purposes only. There is a question and answer panel you can use on the side of your screen there, or maybe it's on the bottom, however your screen is configured. You can ask questions that way. So we can, I'll be on the webinar watching for questions, and as they pop up, I will be answering those as they come in. There is a quiz. To be able to get your credits, you have to complete the quiz. That quiz will go out. Well, there's a QR code on the last slide that will have the quiz. I'll also send that out via email if you're unable to scan the QR code for whatever reason. Maybe you're listening on your phone and you can't use the camera on your phone to take the QR code picture of the QR code. So I will be sending that out via a link as well. And of course, you can register for future webinars. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. My name is Mike Magee at blatchfordus.com. And Dave, if you want to go to the next slide. A little bit more about who we are. My name is Mike Magee. As I said, I am a certified prosthetist, and I am the Global Education Manager and Senior Prosthetist for Blatchford. That's my contact information there, the QR code. If you want to reach out to me with any questions, feel free to. You can always do that. That's got an opportunity for you to get my cell phone number and my email. So you can always text or email me any kind of questions. When you do the QR code, it'll ask you if you want to share your contact back to me. Feel free to do that, and I'll have your contact information on my phone. But again, I've been with Blatchford for about 13 years now. It's been quite a while. In fact, I see some people on the list that I knew back in that some attendees that I see on here that I knew back when I started here. So it's always fun to see that. And we've got David Cekovsky on the line. David's going to be doing the bulk of the talk. I'm going to be doing a little bit about a study that came out recently. I'm going to be mentioning that and talking through that study. I think you'll find it pretty enlightening if you haven't heard about it already. David, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm David Cekovsky, and I've practitioner for Blatchford. I've been in Blatchford for 8 years, and very much enjoy meeting a lot of you folks out there in the field and demonstrating and explaining and rolling up our sleeves and working with the products and your patients. And look forward to discussing some facts and figures about the Elan IC and the standard Elan today. I would
All right.
like to.
Thanks, Dave.
Yep.
Yeah, if you want to turn the camera on, we'll go on to the next slide and talk about what we're going to be discussing today. We're going to be talking about basically the Elan and the Elan IC, talking about the differences, who's it for, how to fit it, and all that kind of stuff. And like I said, there is a study that I will be mentioning that Hanger put out about a year and a half ago or so. And I'll be talking through that and some of the benefits that it proved. We know hydraulic ankle works. We know the microprocessor control that hydraulic ankle works. And there's some evidence that they reported on that I'll be talking about. So if you want to go ahead and take it over, Dave.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining us today. We'll talk about the Elan and the Elan IC. We'll talk about the patients that would be good candidates for the products. We're going to understand the product, what it's about, the biomimetic design of it, how we use the body as sort of a map, and we design products that are mimicking the biological function of our human anatomy, because we would like to be able to capture those same efficiencies that the human anatomy has. So we're going to I'll use the term off and on, as Mike will, throughout the presentation, biomimetic, mimicking biology. We're going to discover the proven clinical benefits of the Elan IC through the clinical research, and Mike's going to elaborate more on some of those facts and figures. And we'll talk about how to fit a line program. Programming is very simplistic and user-friendly, and we'll talk about setting up hydraulic ankles to reap the maximum benefits, to reap the maximum activity out of the particular device. So challenge for amputees, as we all know, we can look at this picture and we can say, well, where there's red, that doesn't usually represent a good thing for our patients. So amputees have a lot of challenges, as we know, a lot of statistical significance that falls into place here. 58% report at least one fall per year, 10 to 40% increase in energy expenditure for transtibial amputees. 44 to 70% increase energy expenditure for transfemoral amputees. And we can see from the picture there to the right of the screen, overusing the sound side can lead to joint pathology. It can lead to expending too much energy, lack of efficiencies. And you'll see there's even a red spot on the model's brain there. That's increased cognitive demand. That's having to think too much about what activities you're doing. You want to remain safe, and you're offloading the prosthetic side historically. What we're trying to do is compensate, and we're trying to address these particular issues and have corrective measures that are in the design of our products so that we can have a more balanced representation, so that we can have an equal share of workload on the prosthetic as well as the sound side, because we want to avoid overworking the sound side and underworking the prosthetic side. Underworking the prosthetic side, as you can see, can lead to disuse, atrophy, spongy bone, osteoporosis, weakness in the bones. This patient here is more than likely going to have back pain with prolonged use of offloading the prosthetic side. Conversely speaking, on the sound side, having working the knee joint, the ankle joint, the hip joint, osteoarthritis can set in. Amputees are 2 to 3 times more likely to develop osteoarthritis. And as you can see, 60% report moderate to severe back pain within 2 years of their amputation. Residual problems with the skin, ulcers. So we have a superimposition of our Elan over top of the human ankle. And we always talk about the biomimetic pivot point of the ankle. We're trying to capture the same efficiency that the human anatomy has. So those 2 axis points that you see on the Elan, that's the biomimetic pivot point of the human physiological ankle. If you move that pivot point, you're actually changing how a human being would walk. You're changing the pivot point. And I often say this when I'm out and about. And if we're working with patients who have a transfemoral amputation, and maybe that patient has a long residuum, you put a product on there, sometimes it will lengthen the patient's knee center. And the patient not only has trouble getting in and out of the car because they might end up hitting their knee on the dash and it's a little bit uncomfortable, it's non-symmetrical looking, but also when that patient walks, more often than not, on that long residual limb side that has the longer knee center, that has the non-symmetrical knee center, on that side, we'll usually see sort of a whipping effect. Extension assist is fairly fast on that side. And one of the reasons why that really occurs is because that pivot point has been altered from the biological pivot point. The lever arm is longer. The patient is not really trying to whip it out there, but because that pivot point is changed, they have more of an advantage. Their lever arm is longer. So trying to maintain that pivot point by perhaps using a prosthetic knee that raises the knee center, often helps to negate, minimize that whipping effect. So is true of altering the pivot point of the ankle position. So foot flat occurs as our human anatomy foot flat occurs when using our particular device, when our resistances are set appropriately, and we want to match the contralateral side in activity. So that's very important to try and maintain those biomimetic, biological pivot points. We also talk about rocker points, heel, ankle, forefoot, and medial lateral rocker. We're taking a prosthetic device and we're trying to substitute our independent heel and toe springs with hydraulic resistance variances to either shock absorb or drive the activity of this patient's experience. So we are using our device to try and replicate our physiological efficiencies. And you'll see all of our feet are sandal toe design, so it's more correct in the anatomical appearance. Also, our toe springs are equipped to meet the needs of those particular foot shells. So we have patients have given us the feedback that we have an increased medial lateral stability experience with this design. I'd like to summarize this page by saying increasing or decreasing hydraulic resistances can either drive or shock absorb the activity of the springs. You'll see on the left side of the screen, high resistance and low resistance. Those chambers on top, you'll see a T and you'll see a gray box. Well, the gray box represents hydraulic fluid. The T represents a plunger in that hydraulic chamber. The coil underneath represents the spring and the plates, the heel plate, the heel spring, and the toe plate, the toe spring. So if you increase a hydraulic resistance, you will get the behavior of a stiffer spring. So if we increase hydraulic plantar flexion, you're going to increase the presentation of the durometer of the heel spring. If you increase your dorsiflexion resistance, you're going to get a stiffer toe spring. You're going to get the activity of having a stiffer toe spring. So all we need to really know is increase the resistances, and you get a stiffer representation of whatever you are adjusting, either the heel plantar or the toe dorsi. Conversely speaking, reduce those resistances, and you will get a soft experience in the heel spring or the toe spring. So storing energy and returning energy is the behavior of those springs. And by increasing or decreasing the resistances, you either drive or shock absorb. So when you absorb the energy, you're dampening. When you increase the energy, you are getting more of a return effect. And there is a little video here, I think that hopefully it plays. Yes, it does. So high resistance is really driving the spring. So I'm increasing my plantar flexion resistance. Let's just call these both plantar flexion resistances. When I increase my plantar flexion resistance, I increase the pressure in the chamber. It has the activity of driving that spring, increasing the energy return. If I decrease my plantar flexion resistance, I have more of an absorbing, more of a dampening effect. I'm making that heel spring appear softer. So stiffer hydraulics, you get less compliance, but you get more energy return. The softer the hydraulics, you get increased compliance, increased agreeability on whatever environment you're walking on, but you get lower energy return. And on the bottom of the screen mimics how muscles work. In short, we are really trying to replicate eccentric and concentric muscle firings, lengthening and shortening of muscle groups. We're trying to replicate that in the human body with our scientific design. Increasing or decreasing hydraulic resistances either drives or shock absorbs the activity of those independent heel and toe springs. See if I, there, I will go to the right place here. So standing on slopes, we're looking at a fixed ankle on the left here. And if my patient is standing on a slope, because the ankle is not finding the compliant terrain, the ankle is very rigid, it's a fixed, rigid ankle foot. The patient is having to, the whole way to the left, they're having to bend at the knee in order to find the compliant terrain and try to better balance their center of gravity, center of mass over center of pressure. And then you'll see if they're not bending at the knee, well, they have to kind of bend at the waist in that next picture in order to try and get their center of mass over center of pressure. The whole way to the right with a hydraulic ankle, since the ankle finds the compliant terrain by its ankle motion, it plantar flexes, the body can remain more straight up and down, less compensations. That's a big thing that I also like to say when I'm traveling. Um, Less compensations. The body, the sound side, the contralateral limb shouldn't have to work harder to stabilize the activity of the prosthesis. What we want to do is have a device that does more so that the human anatomy can do less. And in short, try and balance the workload between the prosthetic side and the contralateral side. So less compensations on the right than on the left, as you can see from this description. Rigid ankle feet. Walking down a slope, you're going to have to control your rotation because your descent is pretty fast. You're not having the plantar flexion moment that increases knee stability, that also helps slow the rotation down. And if you're walking up a slope with a rigid ankle foot, you're going to not have the dorsiflexion activity that you would in a hydraulic ankle. So you're sort of fighting the approach of walking up the slope. It is not participating as much as the hydraulic ankle would. The hydraulic ankle helps to reduce the propulsion when descending a slope, and you're controlling the rotation. You're controlling your descent. And most especially with the Elans that we talk about, you are controlling the descent by controlling the resistance through the range of motion, which is simulating muscle activity. You're getting a brake and an assist walking up and down slopes. It's almost simulating muscle activity. You have the dorsiflexion the whole way to the right. You're lessening the resistance to progression, so you were able to ascend slopes with greater efficiency. So I'm hoping that this video kind of works. There's a fixed ankle on the left, the same knee the individual is wearing in both frames to the right and left, but fixed ankle on the left, hydraulic ankle on the right. Whoops, I have to do this for you folks. Let me try to back up. See if I can make this work for me. My video is not working. I don't think you guys can see my video, but
So that video's messed up recently. Just for some reason, it started acting up. Just go ahead, move on.
so I get a chance to describe. So my patient on the left with a fixed ankle, when they're descending that slope, because they have the same knee on the right and left, but because they have a fixed ankle, they don't have as much plantar flexion activity. They are actually going to be grabbing onto the wall in that video to the left to try and balance themselves better. They're taking non-symmetrical steps. They're a little bit off balance. And on the right, they have a more controlled descent. They get quicker foot flat with the hydraulic ankle, increasing the knee stability, lessening the compensations, lessening the behavior of the contralateral side to try and compensate. That was a really good video. I wish I could have shown that one. I don't do it justice by just talking about it. Use of hydraulic ankles. In-socket peak internal stresses reduced up to 81%. In-socket loading rate reduced up to 87%. The activity is happening within the ankle itself to open up the window for that impact to occur, lessening the shear forces on the bony prominent residual limb and also the vulnerable tissues of the residual. Improved symmetry. You'll see on there as well that the prosthetic side, it says plus 14%, sound side minus 17%. So the goal is to balance out the workload and have the prosthetic side do an equal amount of work. But we're saying that the prosthetic side is actually doing more work than the sound side, which our goal is to get to equal the participation on both sides. So instead of them having to compensate with the contralateral side and offload the prosthetic side, they're able to put more work into the prosthetic side. And as we know, and as we can reiterate, the Elan stays dorsiflexed in swing. The hydraulic ankle stays dorsiflexed in swing, increasing the position to help mitigate, reduce possibility of scuffing the toe. So you have more dorsiflexion in swing. Increased toe clearance. Faster self-selected walking speed with the use of hydraulic ankles. Reduced metabolic cost of walking. Reduced asymmetry of interlimb loading when standing on a slope. So we're balancing this workload out from right to left side. 24% reduced interlimb center of pressure movement when standing on a slope. Less compensations in general. Improving quality of life, obviously, that is the goal for all of our prosthetic patients. Increasing their safety. 18% increase in toe clearance reduces the chance of trips and falls. Reduction in center of pressure deviation during standing, indicating better greater control, greater stability, lessening cognitive demand. That's a big one. Greater comfort, 60% reduction. You can see there. Balanced limb loading, reduced chance of long-term limb disease, reduced contralateral foot plantar pressure, improved energy efficiency, and that is certainly the recipe here. We're trying to improve the quality of our patients' lives. We're trying to improve their overall efficiency. We don't want them to have to work harder than they should be working. Bilateral users, they really do enjoy the Elan. We have a standing support mode, not only the brake and assist mode with ramp ascent and descent, but the standing support mode bilaterally is really a game changer, whether they're on slopes or level ground. Just more security, more confidence, less work to balance themselves. They have increased plantar flexion and dorsiflexion resistance to give them a simulated lock when they stop after 0.8 of a second. Here's our hydraulic ankle range. Top left, it's the Elan IC, the Elan inductive charge. It has a magnetic charger on the back of it. That's what that square is on the posterior, proximal posterior. That has a built-in Bluetooth. It's waterproof. Moving over to the right, it is the standard Elan that has a port that you plug the dongle in the back, the communication dongle that communicates with your laptop or your tablet or your phone. That is about 6 millimeters shorter than the Elan IC that is waterproof, that has the built-in Bluetooth. There's the standard Echelon, 3 from the left. First hydraulic ankle that's on the market, the Echelon. Every hydraulic ankle that's on the market is after this particular device. These hydraulic ankles have a biomimetic ankle pivot point. That's the biological ankle pivot point, captured for its efficiency of the human anatomy. Moving towards the right, the fourth from the left, that is the Echelon VAC. That is a hydraulic ankle that has 6 degrees of plantar flexion, like all of the ones to the left of that, 3 degrees of dorsiflexion. But with that hydraulic ankle, it has a pneumatic chamber built on top of the hydraulic activity. It attaches to a hose that coming out of a port on the ankle that goes into a valve block that goes into a filter that attaches to the socket, and you basically have an elevated vacuum hydraulic ankle. So there's no on motor to that. There's no batteries. It is all uh, operated just by plantar flexion and dorsiflexion, mechanical. And to the right of that, you have the Echelon VT, vector thrust. That is a hydraulic ankle that has torsion and shock absorption. You have 15 degrees of rotation from a neutral, and you have 10 millimeters maximum of axial compression, 4 to 5 millimeters of axial compression in daily activity with that particular device. Osseointegration patients, that's a great choice for those types of patients. Patients who are hiking, twisting and turning, painters, any activity that you can think of that would be that could benefit from the facilitation of torsion and rotation. Lastly, to the right, that's the Echelon ER, that's extended range. That has 19 degrees of plantar flexion from a neutral position, and it has 6 degrees of dorsiflexion. So it has increased hydraulic range of motion. And that would be used for individuals who like to attack more extreme terrain and more extreme environments. Barefoot walking is facilitated quite effectively with that. Also, heel height changes are really accommodated appropriately with that particular device. Improved sit to stand, sitting with your foot flat on the ground. Hydraulic ankles, everyday activity. High energy sports and football, basketball, racquetball, things of that nature would be more of our elite series of feet. Hydraulic ankles are for everyday activity. And of course, you can run across the street. You can, certainly avoid traffic and run through the rain with them. But for long distance running and for higher activity, that is our elite series, which is a rigid ankle foot. On the bottom, you'll see the Avalon series. That is a flexible keel, short toe lever. The keel of that is shaped with a rocker bottom. That is for our K2 population. It has one adjustment for for resistance. It controls plantar flexion and dorsiflexion resistance with one control. We also have a hybridized version of that is a vacuum K2 Avalon vac, and that is the right on the bottom. Hydraulic ankle series. Oh, this is a patient who has been on an Elan for quite some time. Met Julie in the Pacific Northwest, and Julie, she did say this, hey, this is like getting my ankle back. This is exactly what I've been missing. I not only lost my leg, but I lost my ankle motion. I lost my musculature. I lost my assistance by going up a ramp and my brakes by going down a ramp. So she said, I've got my ankle back. Now I've got my musculature back. And this particular version that Julie is wearing obviously is waterproof. This is the Elan IC, inductive charge. Takes the effort out of being an amputee, mimics natural muscle resistance and ankle motion. Remember, this is a battery-operated computer that controls the resistance. By controlling the resistances, you either drive or shock absorb the activities of the independent heel and toe springs. Microprocessor controlled, we have standing support. Patient stops for 0.8 of a second and they get high resistance in plantar and dorsiflexion. They get a simulated lock in place, whether they're on flat ground or standing on sloped environment. Simple and compact. It's the lightest microprocessor foot on the market. This has a built-in Bluetooth, this particular one, and it's also waterproof. So it constantly monitors and adapts the resistance to speed and terrain. So it knows it has angle sensors and tilt sensors inside that whenever you change environments, all of the time, those resistances are changing in real time. So angle tilt sensors plus cadence sensors. You change your speed, the resistances change. If you go from a medium to a slow to a fast, the plantar flexion resistance will increase, the dorsiflexion resistance will decrease to give you a quicker approach over the toe. When you're going down a hill, you will get less plantar flexion resistance that simulates a soft heel. You'll get quick foot flat, and you'll get increased dorsiflexion resistance that gives you the brakes. Prosthetic device does more so the patient can do less. It makes them more efficient. They don't have to work as hard once they have the participation out of the device. The hydraulic ankle self-aligns to the ground. It reduces socket pressures, improves posture, balance, and reduces the risk of falls. The microprocessor adjusts resistance to speed and terrain. It improves symmetry and balance, and hopefully confidence, self-esteem, quality of life. Detects when you're standing still, ramps up resistance to support you. That's the standing support aspect. Once again, bilateral users are very much fans of that particular aspect of the product. Now you'll see the magnetic charger there on the back. Charge it for 5.5 hours, and you get up to 2 days use out of it. I just ask patients, just charge it every night like we charge our cell phones. We all do that, it seems. As I stated earlier, it's the most compact and lightest microprocessor foot on the market. Because this doesn't have any plugs or any place for the any liquid or water to gain access to, this one is waterproof. 5.5 hours to charge, as stated earlier. Get up to 2 days use out of it. Just charge it every night. And if your patient does run out of battery, they have a hydraulic ankle. So, that's one thing that I think that I've said so often, that when I program this device, I programming is the last thing that I do. It's sure it's important to add the icing on the cake whenever you're all done preparing and preparing it. But you get all your alignment out of the way, and your patient is happy on it. Once they're walking quite fine on the ankle that is not calibrated or not programmed, that's when you program it. That's when your patient walks at a self-selected walking speed and you calibrate it for them. And that will place in. The last thing that you do is turn on the standing support mode. You'll check that on. We'll go over that here in a little bit as well. More flexibility in their day-to-day life without risk of water damage. And most do purchase the Elan IC. It's the newest out there. It's waterproof, but you still can get the standard version. The standard version, if some people are wanting to put a cosmetic cover, to install a cosmetic cover, it might be a little easier to install a cosmetic cover with the standard as opposed to the Elan IC with the magnetic charger platform on the posterior of it. So in normal walking with the Elan, you get a medium plantar flexion resistance. The foot plantar flexes, increased foot flat, increased knee stability. The heel spring is loaded. At mid-stance, the heel spring releases the energy to aid in tibial progression. You have a medium dorsiflexion approach. That resistance allows controlled tibial progression. There's a 3-degree dorsiflexion stop, and you want to be able to hit the dorsiflexion stop of 3 degrees at the opportune time in the gait cycle. And when you do that, it encourages deflection of the toe spring, which aids in forward propulsion for your patient. So that's why we set it up using the wedge, and I'll touch on that here in a moment. You just want to be able to make sure that you add room for the appropriate dorsiflexion for the patient so that they can hit the dorsiflexion stop late in stance and that they don't hit the dorsiflexion stop prematurely. Late stance, the toe spring deflects, then releases energy to aid in forward propulsion. In swing phase, it stays dorsiflexed, so you have increased toe clearance. Of course, we are accommodating to changing terrains and changing cadences. Those resistances change in real time constantly. When I first started, I had a patient who was wanting to try the device, and I remember we placed the device, the Elan, on the patient, and then they walked outside in the parking lot, and they went into a big ravine that was filled with river rock, so the water uh, wouldn't wash the soil away. There was a whole load of river rock all over this ditch in the back. So the patient proceeds to walk down into the embankment over all of these river rocks, and they are laughing, and I'm kind of like biting my nails thinking, wow, this is this dangerous terrain for that patient to try and negotiate with this particular device. But every one of those river rock was presenting itself like a miniature hill and valley. And every change in inclination and cadence, the resistances were changing to either drive or shock absorb the activity of those independent heel and toe springs. And also, the design of those toe springs being able to be compliant to the changing terrain and help keep the center of mass more efficiently over the center of pressure, simulating eccentric and concentric muscle firings. I know that sounds like a lot for you guys to hear, but I was so blown away with the activity of that. At that point in time, I said what Julie said, wow, that patient has their musculature back because they're able to gain control electronically, changing resistances, driving or shock absorbing the activity of these springs, keeping their center of mass over center of pressure. So we adjust hydraulic resistances to get this behavior, get this activity to happen. You get a braking response when you're going down a hill. So you can see on this diagram, downhill braking, we're lessening plantar flexion resistance, but we're increasing the dorsiflexion resistance. Increasing the dorsiflexion resistance give us the presentation of a stiffer toe. So you can say it as a stiffer toe spring or even a longer toe lever. And less plantar flexion resistance gives us the behavior of a softer heel spring, quicker foot flat. Uphill, you're getting increased plantar flexion resistance, which gives us the behavior presentation of a stiffer heel, and you get a softer toe with decrease of dorsiflexion resistance. So you're getting assistance going up a hill. Fast walk, when you're changing cadences and you start walking faster, you're getting a stiffer heel and a softer toe that increases your tibial progression, increases your efficiency to walk faster. You're able to get over the toe more efficiently. Standing support, you're getting increase in both plantar and dorsiflexion resistance to give you that simulated lock in place. Some of the statistics, reduction in knee flexion, greater control, increased load symmetry, prosthetic side use. You're increasing the use of the prosthetic side, whereas historically, people like to favor the prosthetic side and offload the prosthetic side, and then their sound side limb ends up overcompensating. Our goal is to equal the workload. So the sound side is doing less work, the prosthetic side is doing more work, increasing the patient's efficiency. Reduces time to foot flat, 4 to 8%. Proven assistance during slope ascent. Yes, we're getting a stiffer heel and a softer toe by the resistances and plantar flexion increasing. Dorsiflexion resistance is decreasing in this particular instance. Increasing the activity of the prosthetic side. Your patient is becoming more efficient. Standing support mode, it happens on level ground or standing on a slope. After 0.8 of a second, the resistances ramp up to maximum. Give that patient the security and the confidence to be able to not have to find their balance point over a hydraulic ankle, over a moving pivot point. They get high resistance, increased stability. Bilateral users, they really enjoy that aspect of the device. Increased security, increased confidence. Elan reduces the joint moments on the sound side limb compared to the Echelon, compared to fixed energy storage and response feet. You can see the statistics there. The product does more, so our patient can do less, increasing their quality of life. Fast walk mode, increasing the plantar flexion resistance and decreasing the dorsiflexion resistance. Again, these happen in real time. If you grabbed onto my example of that patient walking on river rock, those are resistances are changing all the time. All those rocks are hills and valleys, and instantaneously in real time, those resistances are keeping the center of mass over center of pressure more efficiently for that patient. Happens when they increase cadence or when they change terrains, any inclination change, instantaneous in real time. Decreased dorsiflexion resistance, easier progression over the foot, keeps the user momentum, allows for better walking posture, faster walking. As we know, it stays dorsiflexed in swing, increasing the toe clearance, 20 millimeters of toe clearance increased, reducing risk of tripping, reducing those hazards.
All right, thanks, Dave. I just requested control if you could accept that for me.
Sure, Jeff.
Uh, and I'll that way I can control your computer there. Just don't touch your mouse. So what I'm going to do is talk about a study that came out recently. Again, it's not super recent, but it was about microprocessor ankles and how that they can improve function with patients. So it was published in the Journal of Rehabilitation and Assistive Technologies of Engineering, Volume 9. And it was the authors are Eric Weber, Phil Stevens, Dwisha England, Vanessa Schwilly, and Shane Werderman. And that's a QR code, by the way, of the actual paper if you want to get it. I'm going to go through some of the highlights of it, but it's really worth reading the whole paper. They did a fantastic job with this, and if you haven't been keeping track of what Hanger has been doing in their research side, it's really fantastic stuff. They've they're a massive company, and they're using their size for good and creating some really good evidence that we as an industry get to benefit from. So kudos to them for that. And what they did is they utilized a retrospective analysis of data from Hanger Clinic. And like I said, all these authors are employees of Hanger Clinic throughout the U.S., but this study was not associated with a manufacturer. And what they were trying to do is figure out, well, first, again, why is it significant? Well, A, it's not funded by a manufacturer, and previous research concerning microprocessor feet was conducted in research labs and not in real-world environments. And this study evaluated if there are differences in physical function, mobility outcomes between microprocessor feet and non-microprocessor feet users in real-world scenarios. So again, they were looking at real-world stuff, not just gait lab data. And the primary purpose of the study was to determine the impact of microprocessor feet upon physical function. And the secondary aim, so that was the main goal. The secondary goal was to provide preliminary findings on the impact of microprocessor feet upon back pain, residual limb pain, hill ascent and descent using a single limb question or single item questions from the PEQ. So that's what they were trying to do. And what they did is they had 20 unilateral transtibial amputee participants, and they regularly collected data from those 20 patients. And they assessed them on an average of 31 days after taking delivery of the microprocessor feet. And what's really important to note here is that all they did was change the foot. They did not change suspension. They did not change socket. It's not even like they duplicated the socket. They didn't change the socket or suspension. So the only thing that changed was going from a non-microprocessor foot to a microprocessor foot. Then again, the outcome measures are physical function using the PROMIS PF, and then in mobility, they use a PEQ, and they use the quality of life, including function, mobility, and well-being. And here's the number of each of the feet they used. Again, there was a total of 20. 12 of them were the Elans. So certainly what this study shows is able to be extrapolated into the Elan. If there's 12 of them, 60% of them were the Elan, then clearly what this study shows is indicative of the Elan. So let's see what I just did there. I hit the wrong button. So what did it find statistical significant improvements in it? An increase in physical function scores with the PROMIS PF. It showed statistically significant improvement in prosthetic fit. Remember, they didn't change the fit. They didn't change the socket or the suspension, but changing the foot had a statistical significant improvement in the way the prosthesis fit. It showed improvement in sitting comfort. Again, they didn't change the socket or the suspension, just the foot. Back pain. Now we can see, okay, well, because of the hydraulic ankle and the microprocessor control of that, okay, we can see some improvements in back pain. And then clearly hill ascent and hill descent. Those are what people would probably consider obvious rationale for microprocessor feet is hill ascent and hill descent. But all those other ones, they often get overlooked. And some other takeaway points. So the 5-point improvement, and this is a quote straight out of the paper, the 5-point improvement in the PROMIS PF score far exceeded the recommended range noted as minimally important difference for improvement, suggesting that the transition from a non-MPF to an MPF was not only statistically significant, but it was clinically meaningful. So it wasn't just a statistical significant improvement. It was so much of an improvement that it was clinically meaningful beyond just statistical significance. And then transitioning to a microprocessor foot showed improvement in the quality of life using the PEQ, where 5 of the 7 had statistically significant improvements in real-world tasks and assessments. And navigation of steep hills showed the greatest improvement. Again, we would kind of expect that. But this one and the next one were ones that we probably would not have expected. Significant improvements in their opinion of the fit of the prosthesis, despite not changing the socket. And lastly, this is a big one because this is something that if I ask a clinician, what do you think about microprocessor ankles, microprocessor feet? They're going to, a lot of times what people will tell me is I don't like to use them because they're heavy. Well, this study showed a transition to microprocessor foot was not perceived by the patients, was not perceived as increasing the weight of their prosthesis. So we routinely think of that as a challenge, but in reality, maybe it's not quite as big of a challenge as we think it is. And authors were surprised by the finding that back pain intensity improved with the use of a microprocessor foot. So let me go through some quick user selection criteria. I like to say rule them out versus rule them in. What does that mean? What I mean by that is when a transfemoral patient walks in your office, a lot of people initially think, okay, it's a microprocessor knee candidate. We'll start there, and then after talking to the patient, either they're not capable of using it, they don't want to charge one, whatever the reason may be, they aren't going to be using a microprocessor knee. And then we rule them out and go into a mechanical knee or whatever other options there are. Well, I suggest we should be doing a very similar thing with microprocessor feet. I say rule them out versus rule them in, meaning let's start with the microprocessor feet. And if it's not a candidate after you've had your evaluation with them, they don't have the insurance for it, they don't have the desire for it, they don't have the leg length requirements for it, whatever it may be, different activity level, whatever it is, then you rule them out. But start with people as a candidate for microprocessor feet versus starting with something else and then finding the off patient and deciding to do a microprocessor foot on them. Because we truly believe it's ideal for most, if not all, K3 individuals, again, barring things like insurance, limb length, that kind of stuff. But it does have benefits for the low patients, low activity, up to even some high activity patients, depending on what type of high activity they do. Individuals that could benefit from additional stability on slopes or even on level ground, and could benefit from reduced energy expenditure. Patients with socket pain or discomfort. Again, that study, go back and read that study if you're unsure about this. It's very clear. The evidence was pretty overwhelming that the microprocessor foot makes a big difference. One that's not on here is and David hit it pretty hard, is the bilateral patients. That's something that we've seen a lot of success and a lot of uptick with patients, is putting them on an Elan, because they get the benefit of the microprocessor ankle, the motion that happens, but then also standing support engages and allows them to be able to stand comfortably. That's always kind of a negative with hydraulic ankles for bilateral patients, but with the Elan, they can stand there and have good balance on level ground. So that's a big benefit to the Elan or Elan IC. And obviously, patients weighing under 275 pounds. Bench alignment's pretty standard. We do have this alignment wedge that comes with it, and that just helps you verify your alignment. It's very simple to use. You're just going to drop your weight line down, and there's a little mark on the chassis itself which shows where the weight line should fall. You want it to fall in the crosshairs or slightly posterior to it to make sure it's in the right spot to get the right amount of motion out of the foot that we're looking to get. Programming is very easy. It is a a tablet, a Android tablet, and it's very easy to do. If you look at the screen there, you've got the plantar and dorsiflexion resistances at the top. You've got the sensors that are happening. Then you've got PF and DF. That is your hydraulic resistance settings. You're going to set those to make sure they've got a nice smooth gait. You're going to select transtibial, transfemoral, and then calibrate them by just pressing the start button. They're going to walk in a straight line, and that's going to calibrate the ankle. And really, that's it. Once it's aligned, it's a matter of taking about 8 steps. Extremely fast, extremely easy to program, and it's going to take the information from that to determine this patient walking up or down a ramp. And if it does, what changes do I need to make? I need to give it the brake effect, the assist effect, and as Dave mentioned, that brake and assist effect, that's what's so critical to this device. That's what's patented with our technology. We're the only ones that have the independent plantar and dorsiflexion adjustments in real time that are happening at the same time, where you can adjust the plantar flexion and the dorsiflexion to provide that brake effect or that assist effect. And it's going to take that information from that calibration screen. So as I mentioned, the microprocessor is adjusting resistances in real time, and that's what's so unique to this product. It detects when you're standing still. Again, that's a really nice feature. You can see here, she's standing there holding her young child and has full confidence that she's able to stand there in good balance. And it is by far the lightest microprocessor foot on the market. It's inductive charging, so there's nothing to plug in, no water egress could happen. So it is an IP67 charging, as Dave said. So that means it can be in 1 meter fresh water for 30 minutes. As far as evidence goes, we have a whole host of evidence papers on our website you can get. This is all the evidence regarding hydraulic ankles and microprocessor ankles. We also have a white paper that summarizes a lot of the information. So feel free to download that from our website. You can also get it from your territory manager, and I will also be sending that out in a copy of that with the quiz when that comes out. And there's a compendium of evidence also. And speaking of quiz, that's the quiz right there, the QR code. Again, that's our contact information. My name is Mike Magee. We've got David Cekovsky. If you have any questions, please email us. But you can go ahead and take the QR code there to take the quiz. And I will be turning the sign-in sheet into ABC next Friday. So you have about a week to complete that quiz. But with that, I wanted to pause and spend some time with questions. If anybody has any questions, I've been watching the Q&A panel, and it's been pretty quiet so far. So I'll stick around. And David, do you have any last minute thoughts while we're waiting on any questions that could pop up? You can leave it. I'll
yeah. Do you got me there? Able to hear?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, be more than happy to assist in any way. If you guys have questions, please feel free to call. Love to come visit to assist with patients, and if you want to demo the product, I'm more than happy to be there in person or a virtual visit, phone conversation. So glad to help.
Be on the lookout for the next webinar. We'll be announcing what that's going to be coming up in the next week or two. It's going to be a good one. So keep an eye out for your email for that webinar. We're really excited about it. So it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be a really good webinar. I think you're going to want to hear. Just keep in tune for that. Dave, you're still sharing your screen.
Yeah.
Any other questions? What's the best way to reach out if needing assistance with a patient? That's a great question. Dave, if you can put it back in, or at least go back to our contact page, that slide 3, if you could go back to that, just click on that slide.
Sorry about that. Yeah, okay.
That's our QR information. If you can, yeah, put it in a slide there, slideshow. That is our contact information. Feel free to reach out for that. But you can also go to your territory manager. They can, and if you don't know who your territory manager is, reach out to Dave or I, and we can get you in touch with them. But that's going to be the best way to be able to get a demo if you need one, or help with a fitting. We are happy to help in any way possible. Any other questions? All right, with that, I will close it up. Again, be on the lookout for the email for next week. It's going to be a good one. Thank you very much.
Thank you.